Alright guys, what's up? We're gonna have, this show's gonna be a little different than our typical show. Usually you're watching us catch flatheads. I thought it'd be interesting to have one of my buddies come on here who just happens to be, he works for the Fish Commission and he's one of the biologists. He's also a good friend of mine. So we wanted to try to get an interview and get his perspective on some stuff and just hear what he has to say. He's really knowledgeable, really good guy. And yeah, so we kind of came up with a list of questions and we're gonna go over them and get his thoughts.
Hi everybody out there, my name is Mike DePew, as Joe said. I'm the Area 8 Fisheries Biologist out of the Somerset office. We cover about 12 counties out here in the Southwest, anywhere from Cambria and Somerset counties all the way west to the state line, including the three rivers, especially the Mon, the Ohio, and the lower Allegheny River. We do a variety of different studies, not limited to catfish, but also including walleye work, lake studies for bass, as well as many trout streams out there.
All right, Mike, so I know you've been doing a lot of catfish surveys around our area, which is pretty cool. It's awesome that you guys are interested in learning more about the catfish, and you know, we all can learn and grow from that. As a matter of fact, that's how I met you out on the water. You were doing a survey, I believe.
Yep.
And we ran into you guys at the boat ramp.
Exactly.
We were just coming in from fishing.
I believe it was right around last year at this time. We were doing some surveys. I was helping out some grad students from Southern Illinois University who do some Asian carp work up and down the entire Ohio River. And I ran into Joe at about 1 o'clock in the morning or so, a typical time for a catfisherman. We got talking and here we are today.
I've been fishing ever since.
Exactly. So.
All right, Mike. Well, what do you guys, when you guys are out there doing your surveys, what are your means of obtaining this data? Like, what are you guys actually doing out there?
So, I'm gonna give a little bit of background first. About 10 or 11 years ago, my former boss and I, Rick Lorson, were tasked with writing a statewide catfish management plan. So we looked at a lot of the data we had from that time, and we realized we didn't have as much information as we really needed to manage these catfish populations in a lot of our lakes and rivers. So with that plan, we put into effect a variety of different surveys, including stuff utilizing new different deer types that we haven't used in the state before, such as trot lines, hoop nets, and low frequency electrofishing. We also started doing other projects looking at the size of the fingerlings versus the yearlings that we're going to be stocking, and as well as other studies to promote catfishing, such as some of the mentored youth days where we've been stocking catchable catfish for for our anglers or younger anglers, similar to the way the mentored youth trout days are.
Did you guys do, I mean, I don't know if this is really valid in this interview, but I just had a personal question. Did you guys put flatheads in North Park Lake to help knock down?
No, we did not stock flatheads in North Park Lake. We stocked channel catfish, about 250 per acre that were of catchable size. We also brought in some trophy channels from out in Pymatuning, the sanctuary.
Gotcha.
So we stocked those as part of the trophy component. And we used those catfish. North Park Lake has a dense gizzard shad population, and the catfish thrive when we have gizzard shad. They grow well and they feed well, but we did not stock it.
Okay, I just heard through the grapevine that there's been some flatheads placed in there to knock down that population.
No,
but either way, that's cool.
Not there.
All right. So I guess we'll get into some of the data that you have found, and me and you have talked about this a lot, and I think it's some pretty cool stuff, some very interesting stuff about the catfish on our side of the state versus anywhere else in the country, let alone the eastern side with the Susquehanna River Valley over there, and in the growth rates and all that stuff. So can you get into flathead specifically, ages and average ages per pound class?
So we began collecting flathead data as well as channel catfish data around 10 years ago, and we've done some pretty intensive studies on each of the three rivers. And we're looking at not only catch rates in our nets versus our electrofishing, but we've also been looking at growth rates and ages of our flatheads. And many places across the country, flatheads have very quick, very fast growth rate. It doesn't take very long for a fish to get up to trophy size, 8 to 10 years in many places. What we found out here is we have most likely the slowest growing population, but the longest lived population of flatheads in the country. When we started doing our work, some of the scientific literature indicated that flatheads, the maximum age that had been recorded was 34 years of age. We've since broken that probably 15 times over the last couple of years, and we've aged fish up to 52 years of age.
That's crazy.
The interesting part about that 52-year-old fish is that it was only 29 inches long.
What, like
about
11 and
a half pounds.
That's
but
crazy.
that's atypical with some of our flatheads. That's an extremely slow-growing fish. Typically, fish that are in the 20-year-old class, 25, are reaching 30-some to even 40-some inches. However, it does take about 15 years for a flathead to get up to about 24 inches, and about 30 years
now,
on average.
For a 24-inch flathead, what's the approximate weight?
That fish is probably going to weigh around anywhere from like 6-7 pounds.
So
is typically what we're seeing.
So 6-7 pound flatheads are roughly 15 years old. That's crazy
Yeah.
to me. That's cool though, but that's.
So we've seen them, anywhere from age 1 fish up to, as I said, 52. We've gotten a few 40-year-old fish. The interesting thing that I find is that we've started aging some of these fish back around 2011, and we're only finding fish around 30, 31 years of age at that time. And about 8-9 years later, we're finding fish that are closer to 40 years age, more so.
Yeah.
So it seems like a lot of the fish have survived. They continue to grow each year, so they can easily get bigger.
So that class of fish, a lot of them are still alive. That you guys
Oh yes, for sure. I mean, we typically have, I would say there's probably at least 30 to 35 solid age classes of fish out there.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon. I mean, 30-year-old fish represent about 10% of the population that we see.
Yeah.
30-year and older fish.
So what do you think? An average age in the Three Rivers of Pittsburgh for a 40-pound flathead?
That's an interesting question, because I've seen 40-year-old fish that are about 40-pound fish that are 23, 24, and then I've seen them that are about 35 to 36.
Okay.
So there's a wide range.
So we could say 30 plus.
It would probably be
uncommon.
in the middle 30 range.
Wow.
That said, it can be highly variable.
Yeah.
It just depends on the individual fish. That said, none of them are growing quickly compared to any other population.
We'll touch on that too. I want to get your opinion on why you think that is. But just like that data right there, that data right there, these flatheads, I don't know, to me that's amazing. 15-year-old flathead, 7 pounds. So that just shows, man, it's very important. If you're a catch and release guy, it's very important. Like that, if we want to have these fish around, it's important to release them and handle them with care. Unless you're going to eat them, if you want to eat some small ones, that's fine. It probably wouldn't hurt the fish would eat some small ones. But if you got some big fish and you want to release them, take care of them so they survive, because it's going to take 30, 40 years to replace that fish. That's just,
it does take a long time, it's a fishery where we know from the aging of we've done on these fish is that there's a very low mortality rate of these flathead catfish. You're looking less than 5% of the fish are passing away of the larger size fish.
Yeah.
There's obviously higher mortality on your smaller fish because they're more susceptible to predation.
Yeah.
So, that's one of the important things is to release some of these larger fish in this system in particular.
All right, man. Awesome. That's some awesome information. Thank you. yeah, Mike, so jumping into that last point, why do you think the catfish, flatheads in particular, are growing so slowly on the western side of the state in the Three Rivers?
So if you take a look at the native distribution, a map of the native distribution of flathead catfish, the upper Ohio River Basin, the Allegheny and the Monongahela, this is the northeast extent of their native range. And if you look at where we're at with our climate, it's a lot cooler up here. The mountains, the Allegheny Plateau, where a lot of these waters are draining off of, aren't the most productive ones in the country. You go down on the lower Ohio, where you have, high agricultural areas. You go farther south, where you have warmer temperatures for a long time, you're going to see better growth rates. You go over to the Susquehanna, where you have a lot of limestone streams that produce a lot more nutrients. You also have a lot more agriculture with a lot of those counties. Also the fact that they are a non-native, they're an invasive species out there, and you typically see higher growth rates in invasive populations. The fish get in there, they're able to take off and exploit the food resources that haven't been exploited before, when you don't have another predator in that abundance. And that
Gotcha.
size.
So they're trying to mark their territory on the Susquehanna, so they naturally spawn better, eat better, grow faster.
The Susquehanna is a whole different ballgame compared to the Ohio River. I was just out there 2 weeks ago, and just looking around, it looks like ideal habitat for spawning flathead catfish everywhere. There's an invasive crayfish, the rusty crayfish, that are covering the bottom. The flatheads out there utilize those,
Crushing them.
particularly the smaller fish. We are actually doing some diet studies. I was out there helping another biologist do diet studies, and some of the fish that we were looking at, most all of them had crayfish in their bones to some extent. So that's a huge food resource out there. Getting back to out here, water temperatures in the Ohio really don't get up to 70 degrees until June a lot of times out here.
Yeah.
So the fish in the springtime are putting a lot of resources to spawning for the egg and gonad development. And once they're done spawning, late July, they start feeding again. You really only have about a maybe 3.5 month window of when the fish are really putting on growth. And typically they're averaging, once they get over 15, 16 inches, they're averaging about 0.75 inches per year. So they're constantly growing as they get older. The other interesting aspect is we've actually aged some of the fish, and we use a bone called the otolith in their head. And we can actually tell when that growth ring is put down, and you see that it's typically towards the end of the spawn is when we see it, and you start to see the growth again in August, September.
After they spawn, that kind of triggers their growth?
It typically is once they start their feeding again, is what it seems like.
Okay, that makes sense. That's pretty cool. That's definitely interesting stuff right
Yeah.
there. Okay. We'll get back on to, you touched on their, what they're eating, or what you guys are finding they've been eating out on the Susquehanna. What's their main forage in the Ohio River? I mean, I know just from being a catfish angler, I mean, as long as you got a fresh cut bait or a live bait and you put it in the right place, these flatheads will eat it. I mean, have you guys done any studies on, the stomachs of some flatheads around here and what they've been eating?
I can't say we've done a specific study to analyze exactly what the gut contents are of every last fish.
Yeah.
But from having to process a lot of these fish over the years for our age and growth studies, we have looked at different stomach contents. And there are a variety of things in there. And the mantra that you can't have a bait that's too big really applies for some of these fish. Walleye up to 17, 18 inches I've seen in there.
Yeah.
Freshwater drum around 18 to 20. We've had flatheads in our nets filled with, they've had multiple channel catfish in them.
Yeah.
With the fins actually piercing out of the stomach, the spines. So crappie and red horse suckers are probably two of the most common things. I know we use a lot of shad for bait out here, but it's not one of the things I've really seen
Yeah.
in their diets. And I think mainly is because the shad are typically higher up in the water column.
Okay.
Shad are a very oily fish and provide a lot of scent, so when you're putting them down on the bottom, they may provide, just a tempting morsel to the flatheads.
I just think too that soft-bodied fish.
Exactly.
Yeah, those flatheads just slurp them up.
Yeah, they aren't picky. Let's put it that way.
I mean, that's what I've learned. Like I've kind of do my own little logging of my catches. Just to. It's interesting stuff to see what the most common bait is for me, or the most popular bait. But what I've learned, and we talked about it just a little bit ago before we turned the cameras on, it's whatever works best is what I'm putting in the right place. Like,
Sure.
And what I'm using. Like over the years, I'll always say gizzard shad's my #1 bait. That's that's where my confidence is. But that's all I use for the most part. You know what I mean? So there's some nights where we'll just use crappie, or we'll just use walleye, or white bass, or bluegill, and we hammer. So it's I think it's just, for me, it's just a confidence thing. But again, whatever we put out there in the right place, man, they don't seem to be picky, like you said, and they'll eat.
No, not at all. As I said, we've seen them with a variety of different baits in their stomach. I think I even had one occasion where there was a duck in one of their stomachs.
A duck?
So a diving duck, which kind of makes sense. He swam into the wrong place at the wrong time.
Man.
So
That's a bad day for that duck.
It was a bad day for that duck. So there are a variety of things that they will eat, and they will even eat other flatheads.
Yeah.
So we've seen that before as well.
I've seen mud puppies thrown up in my live well during tournaments. But even this year, my big one from this year, my biggest one I caught this year, puked up a big old channel cat, and then another, what we think was a white bass, but it was too hard. It was too decayed or broken down.
Lost a few pounds in that tournament, unfortunately. Yes.
It's like, man, why couldn't you have waited? But it's amazing how much or how just their appetite. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, they're voracious feeders. They have the least gate limitation. It means for their size, they can open their mouths wider and swallow bigger fish than any other freshwater fish in North America. So,
that's pretty cool. Pretty cool stuff, man. Mike is a biologist. He's not a WCO. He does not make the laws. He abides by them, and he suggests we all do too. But I have some questions that I want to ask him and try to get his opinion and his interpretation of these laws, and he can pass that on to you guys and myself as well. So Mike, we'll start out with legal baits in Pennsylvania. There's always, everyone's always questioning what you can and can't use. Some of the rules in the book are there's some gray areas there. I'm on the understanding that any legal game fish that you catch by legal means, rod and reel, and it's in season and size, you can use for flathead bait.
Yes, you're correct. If you've caught them legally, they are in season, they're the right size, you can use them for bait.
Okay.
It could be walleye, bass, trouty.
Okay.
So a variety of those can all be used.
Now, what about the common carp?
So common carp are not legal to be used live. So you can use common carp as cut bait. Once you kill the fish, they become cut bait and not live bait.
Okay.
And they become illegal to use.
Awesome. Because that'll answer a lot of questions, because there's a lot of gray area with that, and a lot of disputes on our local Facebook club, Three Rivers Catfish Club, whether you can or cannot. So that's, you can't use them live, but you can use them cut.
They need to be dead, not just a tail or something cut off and still swimming around, because carp are a fairly resilient fish. They need to be cut up into
If you kill it, you can cube it up or fillet it and use it as bait. And I haven't used it too much, but from what I've heard, it's a very good bait. So
yeah,
you guys can use it. You just got to kill them and then use it. Cut them up.
That's true.
All right, awesome. All right, another law lit catfishermen, because obviously we're going to compare other states to what we have here in Pennsylvania, is rod limits. I know just a couple years ago it was only 2 rods per man. Now it's 3, but you travel, like the pool we're at tonight, we have 6 miles in Pennsylvania, and then we have the West Virginia border. Well, if we have that West Virginia license and we go just downstream of this boat ramp, we can use unlimited rods. But if we come to the northern end of this pool, we're limited on the rods. What's the reasoning, do you think? And again, I know you don't make these rules.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's only 3 rods, and do you think they'll ever change it?
So typically, I mean, that's a statewide rule for all waters, and a lot of that is based off on trout fishing in Pennsylvania. You know, a lot of lakes, particularly on opening day, early season, having more than 3 rods out there, it can create headaches. A lot of people trying to take up as much room as possible. I personally don't see much of an issue with it on the rivers.
Exactly.
But it is the law at this time. It's something that we and the Fish Commission can look into in the future. Whether it could be prudent to actually change it for certain waters or not. I'm not saying it will be or won't be.
But it's a possibility that maybe
There's
in the future
a potential.
to look at that.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, obviously, I like it. I like the idea of it. You know,
Yeah.
as a catfish angler. I mean, I'm not one that would line the streams with rods for trout, but I understand that point as well.
It's
because you'll have some
and
ignorant
there-
guy
yeah,
sitting there taking up the whole stream.
There could be, we've looked at the way you could have potential conflicts with, one angler fishing 5 or 6 rods out on the lake, just spreading out everywhere on early season in trout streams are one of the main issues. A lot of places where you're practicing catch and release and by yourself. Not nearly as much of an issue.
Yeah.
But for now, the regulation remains
3 rods
3
per man.
rods per person.
All right, awesome. All right, well, the next law I wanted to touch in, and this is, you guys have helped us out here with the cast nets in recent years. I think it's partly due to our club, the Three Rivers Catfish Club, and specifically Joseph Gordon put a lot of time and effort into making a bunch of phone calls and emails and all that stuff. Just in recent years, we're finally allowed to use cast nets to get gizzard shad and alewives, correct?
Yep.
Those are the two
two
species.
species.
It's lake-based and river-based. There's a handful of lakes and the 3 rivers here in western Pennsylvania. You can buy a permit and use a cast net for gizzard shad or alewife, and I believe it's a 10-foot net, at least 3/8 inch mesh, which is awesome. I wanted to touch into that as well. I don't want to sound like we're greedy, but why can't we, one, harvest suckers with cast nets? Is it good? I think I know why, but I want to hear your answer.
That's one of the things that I don't know if I've really been approached as to harvesting suckers. It's not something that I can say has ever been brought to my attention as to harvesting suckers with the cast net.
Really just anything else other than game fish.
Yeah.
Why can't we hit? I understand the whole issue with some of the creeks that are stocked with trout, as we're, obviously you can't throw nets there because PA really protects their trout because you guys make a lot of revenue from trout.
For sure.
We get that.
I think that's one of the main issues is why, it's not legal throughout the state in streams, is that, you don't have very many gizzard shad populations in smaller streams. Same with alewives in a lot of our creeks. And it may lead to more angler landowner conflicts in certain areas. I think it would be an issue in certain parts of the state, particularly in areas with trout. That said, in regards to cast net permits in lakes, there may be a potential to expand some of that in the future. I would suggest if there are particular lakes that catfish anglers, bass, striper anglers are interested in potentially getting a catfish permit, talk to your local area fisheries manager or submit comments through the fishing hole about getting those. I think there's some lakes that have plenty of gizzard shad that don't have trout stock populations that could be utilized for cast nets to some extent.
And even other rivers too, like the example right down the street from my house, the Beaver River.
Yeah.
Can we do that same thing as far as maybe
I think
hit them with a bunch of
it's not my management area, but that's one that I think that info can be posed to the area fisheries manager. At least part of the Beaver River, maybe
up to the dam, or that first dam. Because I know in our area, gizzard shad, I can tell you guys who's not from Western Pennsylvania, it's very hit or miss with the shad in our rivers, man. So it's awesome we have that permit, but it's also like, well, crap, that hasn't really produced too many shad for me around here.
Exactly.
But you go just downstream, and there's shad galore, downstream in the Ohio. It's crazy. I don't know. That's a whole other video, I guess.
And that's one of the things that we see. We do an annual survey, actually going to be done this week on the Ohio River, where we do beach seining. And it's designed to look at the forage each year. And we've been doing this for 20-some years. Some years we don't see a shad. We might get one or two. Yeah. Other years the nets are just chock full of gizzard shad. Yeah. And they're typically young of the year, small ones. So 2 to 3 years after that, you're going to start seeing the bigger shad. This year, from some of our other surveys, we've seen quite a few shad in the river, so this is at least a pretty good year for shad.
Yeah. Well, we've noticed that too in the Beaver River. Honestly, just seems like it's just chock full, and I don't understand why they don't just swim a couple miles down and come out in the Ohio. I don't know. They're
attracted to the currents near the dam.
Yeah, that has to be part of it.
And that's a barrier. Yeah. So, you have a pretty swift current there, and the fish just, they nose upstream into the current, and it just happens to be a spot where you can pick up a few here and there.
Absolutely. All right, well, since we're on the bait, moon eye is another one of those baits that seems magical for flatheads around here. Have you guys done any surveys or studies or anything like that as far as trying to find out more about the moon eye in our area? Because I know in recent years, every year it seems like the population's growing.
You know what? We have seen quite a few more moon eye over the last couple of years in our surveys. I mean, we don't typically target moon eye because they're not, they're more of a game fish. For a few years there, and quite a few years, they were a state, endangered or threatened. I can't remember which one off the top of my head. But as the rivers have really cleaned up over the years, the moon eye population has come back quite a ways. And we see them, they're quite numerous now in parts of the Allegheny, Ohio, and even the Mon River. We're actually going to be doing some work here over the next couple of years. We're going to be collecting some genetic material on moon eyes for supporting a potential restoration project for the state of New York. Moon eye used to be native to the upper Allegheny above Pinzua, but they had since been extirpated. So we're going to collect some of the fish from down here and potentially help them in their restoration efforts.
Awesome. What about skipjack? And I know that's another very popular catfish bait across the country. We usually have to travel a bit to catch them, to really load up on them. But I've been noticing in recent years, we're starting to catch them again here in PA, and a lot of my fly fishing buddies are kind of accidentally catching them with some fly, and we've been targeting them and having a little bit of success in our PA dams, which is pretty cool because I didn't think they were up this far anymore.
Honestly, we haven't seen many skipjack in the last few years in any of our surveys. I mean, it's probably going to have been a good 5 to 10 years. The other thing with skipjack is it's very difficult for us to sample because they are concentrated right in that immediate fast water below the dams. And a lot of times we just can't get our boats into those stretches.
Gotcha.
So they're fast moving, tough to sample fish. But their numbers are here in low densities, and they're still...
What's hopeful, at least we're starting to see them, So.
Still good bait, for sure.
Mike, so we'll touch on another thing real quick. As far as getting catfish off the bowfish list, or getting regulations even. I see nothing wrong with bow fishing at all. Actually, I think it'd be fun to do. I'd like to try it out one day, but you would never catch me shooting a flathead, ever, because I'm just all about releasing them, you know, so our future generations can catch them and enjoy what I enjoy out there. What are you guys seeing as far as the bow fishermen in Western Pennsylvania? I'm not, you know, not talking about the Susquehanna. I mean, are they killing a lot of these flatheads, you think?
Not really at all. The one issue out here with bow fishing is that it has to be done in shallow water. So when you're going along bow fishing, it's a lot like the night electrofishing surveys that we do for a variety of different fish species on the Three Rivers. You know, with the bright lights on the front of the boat, and you're typically seeing carp suckers in these shallow areas. I can attest that at night we've seen maybe a handful of trophy flatheads over the years. In fact, I probably have only seen one or two myself in 13 years of working out here on the rivers. So the bow fishermen are not going to be shooting many, if any, trophy flatheads out here. The fish are concentrated typically in your deeper water. It's a much different than in other rivers in the state where you have shallower water. You know, from talking to some of the bow fishing guides out here, they're primarily shooting carp, as well as some different types of suckers. So we can attest from our studies and our mortality rates that, you know, looking at 3 to 5% mortality of flathead catfish, that bow fishermen aren't having any major impact out here on the Three Rivers when it comes to flathead catfish.
That's good. That's good to know, and I'm sure it's good for a lot of you guys to hear too. What's the deal with blue catfish? Are we ever going to see them over here again in our river? A lot of you know there's zero regulations on flathead catfish. That scares me, not having these fish protected.
Look at that flathead.
That's a giant.